to our Reach Out podcast. We are really excited to continue our series on dating. With me, I have some of my good friends, and we're going to have a conversation about what it's like to date in the Christian world, just our different experiences being single, dating, and married. For those of you who don't know, my name is Erin. I'm the children's pastor here, and this is...
I'm Katie. I'm on the worship team.
And I'm Lauren. I'm also on the worship team.
Awesome. Well, we'll start out first maybe introducing kind of our relationship with relationships. Where do you find yourself on the spectrum of single, dating, married? I guess we could add divorced in there too, although I know none of us have gone through that journey. But for me, myself, I'm married. I've been married for 7 years. I married my high school sweetheart. Dated him. He's been my only boyfriend, and that has been a fun journey for us. How about you, Katie?
I have dated, and currently dating as well, both in and outside of the church. So, yeah.
Nice.
I am single. I have dated, gone on dates with a few people inside and outside of the church. I have not been in a serious relationship, but I would like to get married one day.
Awesome. I think it's kind of cool that we all have like different places on this spectrum of like dating and married that we can kind of speak into, especially from the church perspective, right? Of like, what does it look like to date? What does it look like to find somebody? And I feel like there's all these things that go through our heads. So maybe you guys can kind of tell me maybe some highlights that you've enjoyed or some challenges that you faced being single, before you started dating even, or as you are dating, navigating that.
I think the most enjoyable time I had being single was my most recent single time. It was right after I really finally found myself closest to Jesus. And in that time of singleness, I was able to just completely change who I am through Christ. I lost a reliance on having a man. And I actually reached a point of being okay if single is what was meant to happen. I was okay with being the auntie to all my friends' babies and just being done with dating if that was his plan. I just enjoyed our relationship. I still enjoy. But like mine and Jesus' relationship, it was a really special time because I didn't have the distraction of a boyfriend.
Boys can be distracting.
Yes, they can.
Yeah, what about now that you're dating?
Now that I'm dating, I am dating a Christian guy, so it makes it easier to keep focused on Christ when he's also doing that. Having done both, I can see the difference and why it's important. But it's harder because you're spending so much time with this person that you're looking to get to know. You're looking towards marriage. So you're spending a lot of what was free time when I was single with him instead. And now it's kind of like this balancing act of trying to find the right time, and making sure that I'm devoting enough time to Jesus. So it's a little bit of a balancing act now.
That makes sense. Yeah. So for you, would you say like coming out of dating and having that time to yourself with God, was that like something that was life-changing for you? Something?
Absolutely. I mean, I was spending probably a good hour and a half almost every night, praying, reading my Bible, doing devotionals, it was really awesome. It just brought home for me the importance of having that daily time. And I really do miss it when I don't do it with regularity.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like your struggles are like, well, now that I have a man in my life, it's like harder to prioritize or your time management, really.
Yes, time management, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, when you were single, was it like hard being single and like wanting a man in your life, or what did that look like for you?
There were times of like difficulty. I mean, I had to go through a grieving process first. And then once I reached the other side of that grieving process is when I was pushing in deeper to Christ and really building that relationship. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm okay if I'm single, but also, am I supposed to be single? And that was my big question for myself. Like, okay, I'm okay with it, but what is supposed to happen? So I fasted.
Yeah.
And then I met my boyfriend.
And then God answered.
Then God answered during the fast, which is funny. So.
What about for you, Lauren, as you've navigated singleness?
Yeah. It's been a roller coaster journey. I think there's a lot of ups and downs, but I think there are a lot of highlights to being single. Like there's a lot of freedom. I mean, even like Paul talks about, and like you said, like there's a lot of time. Your time is your own. You're not accountable to anybody else for what you're doing. I mean, you're accountable to God, but you're not accountable to, anyone that you're in a relationship with, that you have to, check things with them financially or timing wise. So there's kind of a nice freedom in that. And I've had a good network of friends. I have a lot of friends that are currently single that are kind of in the same boat I'm in. So it's been nice to like be able to have that bond with them. And we've had a lot of fun. Like I feel like I've been more free to like go on trips and to have experiences that maybe I wouldn't get to have in a relationship. I mean, there's definitely challenges with it as well, like, but I think overall there's, the romantic aspect that's not there, but otherwise I have a good enough social sphere really, that I don't feel lonely because I have enough people around me that, are godly people, that are supportive people that I can really rely on and connect with.
Yeah.
I do think being single, especially in your 30s, as you get older, one of the challenges that comes up that I know I have, and I've talked to friends that are in the same boat, is you get more and more set in your own lifestyle and your own routines and rhythms. So I think the older you get, the more challenging it is to kind of figure out what you'd want in a partner, because now you know a lot more about what you want in your lifestyle as well.
That's interesting. You say you think it's harder to figure that out the more you know yourself and the more you know.
Well, I guess it's not as hard to figure it out. It's a lot harder to find it, because like what you are looking for becomes a lot more succinct. But what about you in marriage? What are the highlights?
Oh, well, I always say marriage is the best thing I've ever done. And I believe that. I know that that's like super goofy and cheesy to say. But with that, there are challenges. I mean, you guys spoke about a few of them, of like, you are dependent on each other, right? Which like there's beauty in that, being dependent on somebody and having somebody to talk through things and process things. But there's also like, you have to check in and you're not, roaming free by yourself. And you're two different people coming together as one. And so there are things that come up in marriage, and probably in any relationship really, with friends and family, that like you butt heads on different things and have to navigate, well, what does this look like for me? What does it look like for you? Is there a compromise here of what we're willing to go through, or just to navigate with? And we've been through a lot of different things. I think at some point these podcasts will hear more of our story through sickness and different things. And those, as you face different things in life, those things are challenging because you process them differently. And so you need to support your spouse and process at the same time. So I think those things are hard. But with God, we've been really blessed to be able to navigate those hard things together. And it's brought us closer for sure. Now, you guys said earlier, like, it makes it a little harder to find maybe the person that has the traits that you're looking for. What does that look like? Like, what type of traits do you look for in a godly man?
I made a list.
As most women do.
This is the list I made when I was fasting and trying to determine if I was meant to have someone, what did I want him to look like in my life? And when I say look like, I mean absolutely no physical features at all.
Yeah.
My list is completely void of anything physical. So that was huge for me. I made a list of wants and a list of don't wants, and I made it a point to make sure my wants were longer than my don't wants. Because if you have your don't wants, you're really going to limit what you look at, what you see, you know. So that was key for me, was making my little list, and I added to it over time. And I mean, one of my top things was that he needed to have a strong relationship with God, because I had never been with that before. I'd never experienced a healthy relationship, and a healthy relationship with a man who has a healthy relationship with God. So that was I made it number 2, but it was actually number 1. And puts family after God. Because one of those, it's so easy for you to be like, oh, my children are most important, or, you know, what I want to do is so important. But sometimes what God wants you to do is not what you would necessarily think is the right thing for your family. And I want somebody who's able to recognize that, and who puts God's desires for us first. Or what, not even just desires, but his commandments above his family. But yes, a list is really helpful.
Do you find yourself creating a list too?
Yeah, I definitely have. I think the hard copy is somewhere in one of my journals. There is at least one. There's probably a few since I was like a teenager that have evolved over the years. I think, like Katie said, a lot of it doesn't really come down to appearance as much as character. You know, I think for me, I mean, there's certain characteristics that I think we're just more compatible with or attracted to that aren't necessarily wrong. It's just that we have different preferences and different personalities, so we pair better with different personalities. So I know, like for me, obviously, importance is relationship with God, but like sincere relationship with God, not just someone who goes to church, and like someone who is putting God first in their life, you know, as best as they can. That's definitely number 1. But I think for me also, definitely maturity. You know, someone who's stable in their lifestyle, you know, not that they have to be a millionaire, but someone who's, you know, financially responsible, who's, you know, pursuing whatever career or job path that they feel God's put on their heart, you know, someone who loves their family and has good relationships around them. I think definitely in my experience, the list of don't wants can become like very very long. I mean, especially when there's some very specific things that you're like, oh, I didn't even realize how much I don't want that. But the dating world will do that. Well, it will show you some things that you did not know were options and that you do not want.
Yeah.
Is that how you guys found the things that you don't want, is through like trial and error, or just like observing other people's relationships, or
both?
A little of both. Yeah. I mean, I definitely had a long list of what I don't want portrayed to me in my own past relationships, but I have a longer list of what I do want in the relationships that I've seen around me. You know, my parents and Aaron and Russell, you know, so many other people that have done really well. And, you know, even in the failed marriages that you've seen, there's things to glean from that as well. And like, okay, you could put this on the don't want, but how can you reformulate it to make it something that you want? Like, okay, I don't want somebody who does this, but I do want somebody who does this. So I'm going to flip that wording and change it to what I do want.
I did that not recently, maybe like a couple years ago, in a journal just about relationships in general, like friendships. And I put on both sides, you know, things that are necessary and things I can't tolerate, and made parallels. So it was easy to see if it was stuff that I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel ghosted or ignored, then it was like, okay, on the flip side, that means that I need to have communication and consistency in relationships then. So it was helpful to see like, oh, okay, yeah, these are things I don't want. So what's the positive thing that I want to make sure to nurture and have?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel like having these lists are good ways for you to like find your maybe future spouse, or do you feel like they've been stumbling blocks in any way, or?
I think for me it was helpful again, because I had never actually dated somebody who was truly a believer.
Yeah.
So being able to see my new shaped ideas of what I want in somebody really helped me weed people out when I started kind of like looking.
Now, was that through like dating apps? Was that in person? Okay.
It was dating apps because in person is impossible at this point. I don't know, like when you're in your 30s, you've been out of the dating game for almost a decade. The only place I ever knew to meet people outside of like a college group at a church, which never panned out, was like if you went out to the bar, and that's not where I want to do it. You know, like I'm beyond that spiritually, mentally, physically. I'm too old to be going out that late at night. You know, so for me, it just helped weed things out online in particular, because you can see their profiles, and it's not a foolproof way of doing it, but it did make it a little easier to find the real people to talk to.
What about you for Lauren?
Yeah.
You for Lauren.
You for Lauren.
You, Lauren.
I for Lauren. I agree. I think that it's been helpful on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't know. There's definitely times where I wonder if I'm too picky, but I think when I really think about what's important to me, I haven't met someone that has kind of those character traits that I'm looking for, that shared an interest. Like it just hasn't clicked yet, which I have to, I choose to believe is God's timing ultimately. But yeah, it is definitely helpful tool to have. Yeah. I find it helpful.
Yeah. Just to give you some like groundwork to play off of.
Yeah.
Do you think that it could be detrimental at times?
I think it can be challenging. I don't know that it's detrimental because honestly, a lot of these things are non-negotiable for me.
Yeah.
So if it's like, I want someone who can communicate, if that's not like a negotiable quality for me, like obviously there's times where communication with anyone is difficult, but if it's someone that has like a totally different communication style than I do, then that's not really going to work. Or if it's not someone who is pursuing God, then that's not going to work. Yeah. There's a lot, like the things that I really think about are must-have kind of things for me. So yeah, in the one hand, it cuts down the list quite a bit.
Which is what you're hoping to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's cut down the list for a long time. But yeah, like these aren't things I'm willing to compromise. There's obviously a lot of things we can compromise on, but I think we each have different needs and we each have different desires, and there's certain things that we all need.
Yeah.
So
I think it's so important to go into a relationship kind of knowing those things, right?
Yeah.
Like, and having conversations with people that you are dating or your future spouse about those things. Like a non-negotiable is like, you have to love the Lord, and I have to see that in your life. Like, that those are core values and core beliefs that you both have, that for you guys and for myself included, not finding somebody with that. And Katie, you've walked through that a little bit of like, you've seen what that's done in your life and how it's pulled you from God. And so now coming back, you're like, no, I want someone who's going to push me closer to God and encourage me. And the open communication one, I think, is really huge because we see that in a lot of relationships, right? That it comes back down to communication.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, through the years, I've seen what communication styles, just in general, I don't do well with people that are very explosive. Like, that's not helpful for me. It's very hurtful when I'm with, even if that's just naturally how they are. So I don't know in a lifelong partner that would work well, as compatibility goes.
Right. Well, and ultimately, it sounds like you want someone that you could feel safe with, right? And that's huge.
Yeah, I think that's one of those basic desires.
Stability of some sort.
Yeah. So just to go back a little bit, Katie, you expressed that you did some online dating. Lauren, have you ever dipped into the online dating
I've dipped a toe into the online dating world, a couple toes.
What has that been like for you guys, being Christian women going onto online dating sites, whether they're Christian sites or non-Christian sites? How have you navigated that?
I'm gonna let you go first because I feel like
Mine's a little
yours
shorter.
is successful and short.
And
Yeah.
mine is, I think, I'm hoping it's a total success story in that I'm hoping that marriage does happen with this person. I only joined 2 dating apps. One was not Christian based and the other was.
Okay.
But they were both pretty good because the non-Christian based one, you can put your religion preference and make all that. So it made it a little easier, a little hard. It was more difficult than the Christian one to like vet people out. I don't think I even talked to anyone on that one actually.
You tried.
I tried. But the Christian dating app, I was on it for, I think maybe 2 weeks, and chatted with a couple of people, didn't really go anywhere, and then my boyfriend reached out to me, and then I reached out to him, and he was the first date that I went on. I didn't go on any other dates after him, and we've basically been inseparable ever since. So it's been really good, for me.
So you felt like it was a nice, as Lauren said, successful.
Yes, and I think that one comes down to how that app was specifically structured as well. This one required you to fill out a statement of faith. It requires you, then you have your bio, your personal bio. There's no messaging each other until you've both interacted each other's profiles.
Okay.
There's no sending any kind of pictures, because that's a problem. And so it felt a lot more mature and a lot more safe.
Yeah.
And because you're seeing the statement of faith, it's like you can easily see like, oh well, that's a no, and that I think that's why I found more success there than the other app.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Lauren?
I've had a very different experience with online dating. But I think honestly, like I know so many people that it's worked out for that I truly believe a lot of it just comes down to God's timing and direction, especially for you. You're coming out of a season of fasting and being very prayerful and very, I remember when this was all unfolding and you were very prayerful and mindful about every person that you were interacting with. And, you really were being led each step of the way and just being attentive to where God was leading you. I think certain personalities it also tends to work better for. I have a lot of people I know that were successful and they've just been able to enjoy it to an extent of like going on different dates and meeting, very different people and having a lot of experiences. I'm not really like that. I don't particularly enjoy going on dates, especially, I don't know, I just feel like it's awkward when you're getting to know someone. So I've been very selective with who I have gone on dates with over the years. But I've been trying online dating for probably about a decade off and on, and I've probably tried about a dozen apps at this point between Christian and non-Christian. And I think I've gone on dates with maybe 3 people from online in those 10 years, and they were all nice people. We didn't click. It was funny because actually one of them, once we decided that we weren't compatible romantically, we ended up talking for like an hour after and had fun.
Like all the pressure was gone.
Yeah, all the pressure was off, and like we just wouldn't have worked. Our lifestyles were very different, and we both kind of felt that. But then we just had fun for the rest of the night and like got to talk about stuff. So that was cool. But yeah, it's been very interesting. I also I've had some very funny experiences through the online dating world that just I can only share with my friends and laugh at, because I got matched with someone that had multiple pictures of himself in dresses somehow, and that was my favorite, because we were like a 96% match, and he was wearing like a dress from Target that I also had. So maybe we were matched based on just like style taste. But yeah, that like I feel like does an accurate job of snapshotting like 75% of the people I've encountered online. So
I feel like dating, like online dating apps and stuff is like, I mean, we see it here. You feel great and you're like, I don't know what this world is. I feel like everyone has such a different experience in that world. And some people are like, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
And other people are like, well, I'll try anything. So I feel like, you know, whoever is on the app is kind of like by chance as well, right?
Yeah.
To see who's there. But what I also find interesting is you said we've known a lot of people who have been successful in finding their spouses through online dating. And so would you suggest for somebody to go into online dating and try that? Or would you give them caution before they would go? What would you say to somebody who was like maybe exploring that option?
I would say, I mean, it's an avenue. And there's nothing wrong with that form of dating at all. However, there are things to be, you do need to know some of the dangers of it as well, you know? So yeah, I would optimistically caution someone into online dating if that's the route that they want to go.
Well, and I think that's what I would advise too, is to just make them aware. Like, I don't think there's any harm in trying it and seeing what's out there. But I've had friends who have tried it and kind of come to the same conclusion that I have, where it just, I don't ultimately, I still, you know, am open to it. But I would be very surprised if that ends up being how I meet my spouse, just based on my own personality and the experiences I've had so far. So I've had other friends who have kind of had a similar experience where they just have realized, like, it just doesn't click for every personality. It's a lot. It's almost like job searching.
Yes.
So it's not like, it can be fun and it can be entertaining,
It can be.
certainly. But it can also seem like a lot of tedious work.
Well, and I even felt like that in the 2 weeks that I was doing it. I mean, I was on there almost every day swiping no to probably like 100 people a day before I finally, I think I might have talked to 3 or 4 people in those 2 weeks. I mean, it takes dedication, and it is a job interview. I mean, really, I mean, they're interviewing to be a potential part of your life for the rest of your life, you know? So it's a big interview. It's important.
It's a very big
it's important. Moving forward a little bit, I know earlier you mentioned, like, you know, some people send pictures and stuff like that in the apps, and so that's like things to be cautious to. But as you're single and dating, and even myself being married, how do we all navigate purity within these different contexts? What has it looked like for you guys? What challenges have you faced? What have you set up to protect yourself from certain things?
Great question.
Great question. Yeah. You can go first.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we talk, especially as a church, we talk about purity a lot with teens. That's like, you know, that's that sweet spot. You get kids where their hormones are raging and you talk about purity and all the dangers out there. And then we kind of like fade out and never really talk about it again. And thankfully, like I said, I have a really great support system, a lot of strong Christian women that I talk to that are in different stages of relationship or single. So I'm able to have some really good, intimate conversations about what purity looks like. And I think one of the important things that I've experienced is, like, it's just as much of a struggle for 30-year-olds as it is for teenagers. You know, and I think again, just culturally, we don't usually address it for women as much. Like, we talk about men and temptation and all the dangers, but women were created also to have urges and desires and needs that, you know, God created us to have. And I think it's important as women, especially as single women, to learn and to find resources that are trustworthy, to find people that are trustworthy to talk to see what does purity look like as a single woman, especially an older single woman. You know, there are great resources I've needed to use at different times in my life where you can have kind of accountability apps. If you're struggling with things, you can have an advisor or a friend that has access to certain parts of your life or your online habits, or and I've found those helpful as a single woman. There have been times I've needed to use those. So
purity is it's interesting. It's something that I've always struggled with, unfortunately, but it's something that almost everybody struggles with, which I think part of the way that it's been handled has been shame on that person, to the point where that person no longer feels comfortable talking to people about it. They feel shame having to say it to their friends. It's so I think we need to, as a church, work on that one. Yes, you do need to be pure. That is a commandment from God. But we're human beings and we mess up. And the point of Jesus coming to earth was not to condemn, but to save. And you don't save somebody you don't love. So why would you approach this in a non-loving way? You do need to be corrected. There does need to be discipline, absolutely. But there are ways to do it that show love. And there are ways to do it to encourage people to have those accountability partners and to feel comfortable talking to a confidant of some sort, when you are struggling. I know for my boyfriend and I, we've put in boundaries. We're both in our 30s. We both live alone. The idea of always being with somebody every time we hang out.
Always be chaperoned.
It's unrealistic.
Group dates.
You can only do so many of those when all of your other friends are also busy. I'm not going to call my parents and have them chaperone our relationship. It's absurd.
Well, that's realistic, right?
Exactly. So we've put in boundaries where, we're going to make sure that, if we do enjoy a glass of wine or something with dinner, we keep it at 1. We don't allow ourselves to cross to 2 because that gets dangerous. Right. We've also implemented the rule that we do not make out. That's difficult.
Yeah, I bet.
That's difficult. But that leads to stuff. It's really hard to cut things short when you're in the heat of the moment. And so those 2 things have been implemented and they are working. We are also praying about it because we can't do this without Jesus.
Right.
It's impossible. And we've also got our own friends that we're accountable to. He's got somebody that he can talk to. I have somebody that I can talk to. I have multiple somebodies I can talk to. And we're blessed in our friend group that we have so many of us that are able to be vulnerable with one another. It's a journey.
I love your honesty, Katie, because I think you've mentioned this a little bit too, is like these are hard conversations that the church has sometimes, but sometimes they're just hard to have, to like talk through the intimate layers of it and talk through different things. And I think even as people who are involved in each other's lives, it's like, well, how much should I ask or how much should I press forward? And so like there's this like tension of like, even in the Christian world, of like, I want to be accountable, but I'm not sure that I want them to know this or that. And then there becomes this like hidden, like, well, if I just put it here, nobody will know and then it'll be fine, right? Yeah. But God always knows, right? And so then we start to wrestle with those things in our lives. And I like that both of you have different boundaries put in place or different resources that you're using to help with that. For Russell and I, we started dating when we were young. And I think what was really important for us is that he and I had those conversations of like, just similar to you and your boyfriend, of like, what are our lines? What are our boundaries? And what we came to is like, if one of us is not on the same page, those boundaries aren't going to be held, because it's just so easy to be caught up in the heat of the moment or whatever it is. And then even now in our marriage, we have different boundaries set in place as well. There are certain TV shows that I can't watch because I'm like, that just shows too much. And then at night I think about things and I don't want to be thinking about those things. And even the things in our thoughts, are triggering and can be temptations, and even if they're not things that we're actively physically doing, just having those thoughts. And so I hold myself accountable by like, oh, that's a TV show I can't watch that has too much of this in it or that in it, or you know, Russell had to set his Instagram account to not be male anymore or to remove the gender because of all of the bots. They find out that he's male, and then they start sending all of these different things. And so he was getting spammed with all these accounts, and he's like, I don't want to see it. And so we had to like refigure out what that looks like for social media to explore, you know, purity within a relationship and be in the world, really. And it's hard because there are images and different things all over the place all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot that's outside of your control. Yeah. And that's where like taking it to God is important, you know, because you can sit there and start thinking about all those things, you know, and it's not even like, oh, I intentionally went and looked this up and now I can't stop thinking about it. It's like, it was an ad that popped up. What am I supposed to do with that? You know, and like, you can not think about it, but that's like, don't think about the elephant in the room. Everyone's going to think about the elephant. I'm going to think about that if I keep telling myself not to.
Well, and so, I think even stuff from the past. Like, it's not like just because it's in the past and you've been forgiven and you've been redeemed, it's not like that gets erased from your mind.
That's
like,
very true.
That's still there. Your body remembers it. You remember it. Like, those experiences are still there. But I think it's really awesome that you're sharing that, because I think especially in the church, there's maybe this unspoken kind of idea that when you're married, like sexual purity is just waiting till marriage, and then you're married, and then you're pure. And there's not really, I haven't sensed a ton of acknowledgement that like, oh, guess what? You still can struggle with stuff. Like, you still need boundaries. You still need safeguards there. And that, you know, there's still struggles and temptation that are normal. Like, that's a normal part. It's not just like, oh, something's going wrong. Like, that's a normal part of just human existence. So I think, you know, being able to share that is really... it's really helpful to...
Yeah, because I think for married couples, the only thing they focus on after marriage is a porn addiction.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only issue.
That's the only thing you'll struggle with. But that's not true, obviously. So there, you know, there is a lot more to it than just that.
Well, and I was having a conversation with someone actually yesterday, preparing for this, but we were talking about how, again, like, I feel like there's maybe a lack of acknowledgement of these things as you get older. That, you know, even like what you were saying, you and your boyfriend live each on your own. Like, when I was talking to someone about it, we were saying, you know, again, there's this emphasis on teenagers and, you know, don't let teenagers be together. But there's kind of this, I think maybe a forgetfulness or like you said, not wanting to intrude. But the reality is, like, the older you get, I feel like there's even more of a challenge to purity, I think, because there's way more freedom. Like, you're not living at home anymore. He's not living at home. Like, there's no one keeping tabs on where you are all night, or no one keeping tabs on what you're doing. Like, you have to, like you said, through prayer and through, you know, you have to set boundaries for yourself. You have to pray about those boundaries, and then he has to set boundaries for himself. And then you guys have to come together and set those boundaries together. And it's all on you, as opposed to like having all these external forces kind of putting those constrictions on. So I think, I don't think it would make like a good sermon topic maybe, but like, I do think it's important for the church and for leaders to be aware that people in their 30s are, you know, who are in all these different situations or older, you know, these things are still around, and these things can still have a lot of challenges to them.
I will say pet ownership makes it really easy to make sure you're home at a decent time.
There you go.
Because you've got to be able to feed them dinner and breakfast, and, you know, they need interaction, you know, so like that's a good motivator for me to make sure I go home.
Whatever it takes, right?
You know?
I think the other thing that I hear both of you guys saying is like, while there's like this church, you also have this church community that you're plugged into. So you have these resources of people, women who are Christian women who are walking alongside you, navigating these, and so do I even, and we have a lot of the same very close friends. And so we have a lot of really deep and wonderful conversations, which is wonderful for me. And I know for you guys too, as we navigate what it's like to be single in the Christian world and dating and married. And we have friends all across, you know, those different areas. And so it's been fun to be able to lean into those people and kind of pull wisdom or pull perspective, but then to also realize like, oh wait, I'm not the only one going through this, or I'm not the only one thinking this. And not that it validates your feelings, but it's like, okay, this isn't as scary anymore. Like this is a common thing and we can navigate this together. Yeah. Have you guys felt that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. You know, everybody has those things that they don't want to talk about, you know, and then when you do find somebody who has struggled with that same thing, it's, you know, it's kind of a camaraderie. It's a safe space. You don't feel judged at that point.
Well, I think the enemy's whole strategy is to make us feel like we're alone and that we're, you know, a failure.
Yeah.
So I think when we're actually able to come together as a community and be like, oh, wait, you're human. Like, I'm also human. Like, we're having these human issues. There's a strength in that kind of quiets that shame because, shame wants to isolate you.
Yeah.
So having community and transparency in your community is massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and prayer too. I know our group is big on praying for each other for different things and seeking God's guidance and wisdom as we navigate this world.
So true.
Absolutely.
So as we talk a little bit more of the church, what are ways that the church could support you guys as being single, dating, married? What are you looking for in the church to be able to help you navigate where you are? Or what would you like to see?
Yeah, I think for me, I guess I feel like there's been some, I don't know, I've experienced misconceptions about what singleness looks like or what single people look like. So I guess just addressing that especially is that we're not all the same. We're very different. You know, each single person I know has a very different journey. You know, I think ultimately what I would recommend is have a conversation. Talk to whoever it is that you're talking to, get to know them and get to know what their story is. Because I know single women who are thriving and they have their own homes and they don't want to be married. Through different experiences, they don't want that. And I don't see anything unbiblical about that. You know, again, when we look at Paul and he says, you know, everyone should be single because then you get to focus on God all the time. So, you know, not that everyone wants that, but that's the thing is not everyone wants that either. So I think learning each person individually is really important. You know, learn, does this person want to be in a relationship? Maybe they don't. Or maybe at this point, you know, kind of the boat that I'm in, I want to be in a relationship, but I do have these standards, you know, non-negotiable kinds of things. And I haven't met some, you know, I've had, you know, situationships or, you know, things that came close to a relationship, but just didn't work out. You know, I'm content where I am, and ultimately I'm seeking God first, and you know, but I want that in the future. So I think there's got to be a personal approach to, especially to singleness, that you know, we're not all hopeless and just sitting around like sobbing, and some people are, but that's their journey. So you've got to get to know like each person on an individual basis, and you know, don't just throw the cookie cutter like pray for a husband, because I've had that said to me more than once, where it's and then it kind of puts that stressful ownership on like, well, I just haven't done enough then.
What am
I haven't prayed the magic combination of words that will make a person appear, and it's invalidating because it's like, well, I'm putting God first, and if I'm putting him first, and hopefully whoever my spouse will be is putting him first, then you know, I have to trust in God's timing. God has worked out jobs, he's worked out life paths, so I have to believe this really important area of my life. It hasn't been the right timing. So yeah, definitely don't just throw out cookie cutter like I don't know, or pity. Like some of us are like killing it. Some of us are really enjoying like doing our own thing, even if we do want a relationship in the future. So I think just get to know us, and just, I don't know, prayer, support, encouragement, like, and that all comes once you get to know somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. What about for you, Katie?
I'm trying to think about, I feel like there's a lot more for people who are in relationship than there are for people who are single. There's couples things, there's always something for couples to do.
Marriage seminar,
there's marriage seminars. I feel like the church has done a great job for people who are looking to get married as far as that kind of thing is concerned.
I do want to cut in there real quick and also just say, though, like, as a single person, we can do some mixed events sometimes too.
Yes.
Like, everything doesn't just have to be like, this is for you singles, like, you can go to this thing. But like the couples, we're gonna do like couples retreats, we're gonna do like all this fun. Like, definitely it's okay to like mix we can all interact.
Yeah.
Like,
because some of the married people might know someone that might be interested in that single person. Like, come on.
Lauren's open.
I'm open.
I think it's important for the church maybe to, again, I kind of going back to that purity part of it. There's a lot of the finger wagging and the don't do this and don't do that, but where is the relationship aspect? You've got people that don't know you coming up to you and making all these comments about what you should and should not do in your relationship. Get to know these couples first. If you know one person in the coupleship, get to know the other one. Don't just come at people with a bunch of rules before getting to know them. Because again, you do that and the couple might get turned off from wanting to do things a certain way. I'm a person who, if I'm told not to do things a certain way, I'll dig my feet in and I'll do it anyway, because I'm going to prove you wrong.
Right.
It hasn't worked yet. I haven't proven anyone wrong yet. But that's my personality type.
Yeah.
And so if you have people coming up to me like that, then I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Don't live with my boyfriend before I'm married. Watch me. That didn't pan out. But but that it pushes people more towards this rebellious mentality when there is not love and relation. There has to be relationship outside of our relationship. And I think they can do better for that as well. Maybe, I don't know what entirely that looks like, who does that, but don't do finger wagging if you don't know the couple.
Probably a good idea in general to never finger wag at anybody in the church.
Or outside of
church. Yeah, just don't finger wag. What about for marriage, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, there are definitely more resources for those who are married. When Russell and I were dating, there were like a few seminars for marriage and like being married, and we were invited into those as we were like preparing to be engaged and stuff. And that was very encouraging to see the church kind of pull us along in that. Our experience was like, we had dated for so long, so everyone was like so ready for us to get married. And then the minute we were engaged, it was like, oh, just you wait, ball and chain. And so I think that there's this conversation that we as a community can do better in supporting relationships. Yeah. And I think the same thing happens for like once you get married, it's like, oh, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? Then the moment you're pregnant, it's like, oh, you're in for it.
Yeah, you'll never sleep again.
The conversation changes, which I think is just very interesting. And so I think overall, we as a community can do better at encouraging and walking alongside. And that's kind of what I hear you guys saying too, is like, just walk alongside each other. Let's live life together. Let's get to know each other. And I think ultimately that is the goal of the church, right? Like God calls us to go out and make disciples and be disciples. And for me, what that looks like is coming alongside people and living life and pointing them towards God. And so it sounds to me like that's what you guys want to see as you navigate these stages of your life as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, one of the things that I would love to like see the church do, or maybe see them put an emphasis on more, is just raising up good godly men as well. And that's not solely on the church. Obviously there's got to be people that want to come closer to God, but at least in my experiences, in trying to date Christian men, I found that a lot of them have a very unhealthy view of relationships and of women just in general. In my experiences, a lot of Christian men, maybe they don't have, at least for us as women, I guess it's more common often to get into deep heart to hearts and get into like intimate, transparent conversations. But a lot of the guys who I have interacted with seem honestly very repressed in a lot of ways and aren't taught how to handle their sexuality and their purity.
Yeah.
So I've experienced a lot of instances where either guys interact with women as if they're just like a to-do list, like, oh yes, I want a spouse and you could be spouse, so let's like negotiate terms of seeing each other again. Or like the total opposite, where it's weird and like guys that have a lot of great qualities and are great Christian men, strong in their faith. I talked to someone that was training to be a pastor once, but there's like the sexual perversion because things were so repressed that this person couldn't have like a functional conversation without making it perverted at some point along the way.
Well, because they're taught that we're the ones who make them stumble.
Yeah.
It's almost like, like they're, don't look at women, don't talk to women, because the moment you do, she's gonna seduce you. Like we're Medusa or something. and we're not. Like we're people too. You can seduce us just as much as we can seduce you, and I think there's been a massive imbalance on that.
Well, and I think there's so much focus. I don't know how it's happening, and I don't know how what the solution would be to fix it. But there's so much like focus on maybe the don'ts or there's so much fear that like you said, we're people. Like I feel like the number of guys that I've spoken to that don't seem to understand that and don't like converse as if you're another human or like I think they've just been taught that they either have to like shut off their sexuality or hide it. So I haven't interacted with, at least through dating and dating apps and all of that and just experiences. I know good Christian men that are not like this, but I've seen a lot of examples where, guys just don't seem, Christian guys in particular, don't seem to know how to interact with a woman without either just being like very stoic and calculated and or being weird.
I think we're in like this interesting time in our society, right, where there's a change in perspectives of like even just women's roles in society, right? There's more women who are going and working full time for their careers. There's this shift, and so what I hear is like us kind of navigating that shift of like maybe where our parents grew up and the conversations that they had and what they were told being passed down, but our generation kind of pushing back on that a little bit. And so learning how to navigate, women aren't just, we've had these conversations too. This wasn't one of our questions, but what is the role of a wife at home, right? Like, is it the,
making bread every day.
The scheduler, wife that takes, and in some families that works wonderfully, but I'm seeing more of a trend in women and wives who want to pursue their careers and want to do more than just be home and make their husband dinner as soon as they walk through the door. And there's nothing wrong with that, and serving your husband in whatever way. Yeah. You find best to serve them or that they feel love through your serving. And that's it's up to every couple to decide what that looks like for them. Yeah. But I wonder if that's kind of what we're seeing a little bit too, is like that shift in our society and in just women's roles in general.
I think that could definitely be part of it. I think the internet plays a huge role in all of it, and just access that people have, and then it skews their ideas of what, I think, and maybe it is, maybe it's a combination of both, right? Because you have this traditional value that's brought down through family or through church of like, this is what a woman is. She's, making your bed and bread and everything you need at home. And then you have the internet's version of what a woman is, and that's a very different thing. Sure. And I guess maybe that's what, I feel like that actually would be a good summary of what I've experienced in people, is I feel like they have this dichotomy kind of view of a woman as like, on the one hand, you're either way, we're not really like a person in this in this mindset. Like either way, you're, you know, this very submissive housewife, or you're a very different kind of person, and you know, should look a certain way, should act a certain way.
Right.
And that's not realistic. I don't know any woman that falls in between, you know, those two extremes. That's not common to find.
Yeah.
So I think lastly, what would you say to somebody who is navigating dating today and trying to find a godly spouse? What would be your advice to them? If you could say anything.
I feel like you should start that, because you're at the pinnacle of what that person would want to have.
Yeah, you're what we're trying to be.
Mama to be.
Yes,
married
mom to
lady.
be, married. I think to all of my friends who are navigating this world, it's hard because there's so many things I could say, right? As like, hold on and wait out. But I think really the best thing to say is to seek God in all of it. To surround yourselves with people who come alongside you. I think no matter what you're navigating in life, to have a nice core community of people that you can lean into is really important. And I think that's important in single, in dating, in marriage, to be able to have those resources and to be plugged into a church. I'm blessed that the pastor here is just so open to be able to talk about these things. He's not intimidated to sit down and have a conversation about what marriage looks like, or dating, or singleness. You know, he's very open to having those conversations and navigating that with people who are struggling in different ways or exploring different things. And so I've been blessed by that. So I think my biggest encouragement would be to find yourself a home to plug into, to not have to navigate it alone.
Yeah. I would second that. I would also say, pray hard about it. If you have to fast about it. You know, it's, if you're dating in a godly way, you're not dating to date around. You know, it's a serious thing that you're taking on. You know, you're not dating just to have fun. Fun is part of it, but that's not why you're doing it.
Right.
So, you know, make sure that when you're entering into these dates, just a date, make sure you're praying about it. If you don't feel the peace of God, don't go on that date, even if it means you have to ghost the guy. Don't go on the date. You know, and then when you decide to enter into a relationship, pray about it. And then the big piece, once you're dating, don't stop praying about it. Because you're not secured in marriage yet. Just because you've reached dating doesn't mean that this is your person. You don't know until you're married. How do you know it's going to be that person? I can't answer that one. I have no idea yet. I think I know. Prayer. More prayer. You know, again, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, I believe, is the way that you truly know. You know, make your list. Don't
check it twice.
Check it twice. Don't live by the list either. Because there are going to be things on your list that you think are a non-negotiable, but maybe it's not quite a non-negotiable. Maybe it's more of like a preference rather than a cutoff, you know? Yeah, those would be my two biggest ones. Prayer and just be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of those. I think those are spot on. And I think in praying, kind of one of the things you said stuck out to me about, you know, trusting your gut. And I think in that, trusting that God speaks to you through that, usually. Like, if you have that impulse or instinct that, like, maybe this isn't the right person, you know in your heart, I think, and you know in your spirit when that's just because you want to put up a boundary versus like God putting a boundary up. And I think, you know, again, I think there's that fear of like being too picky or, you know, just trying, you know, oh, just try it. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I remember, you know, there was a person who I knew was interested in me that I wasn't interested in. And he was a good person. It just wasn't clicking. And I remember feeling really guilty about that and feeling like maybe I should just give this a chance. And I just had this like feeling in my spirit, like, no, it's just not, it's not right. So I distanced myself. And many years later, I had the privilege of being at his wedding, and I got to hear his marriage vows, and him and his wife were just perfectly matched for each other. And it was like just this beautiful moment of confirmation for me of that. Like, God will guide you. If you're putting God first and you're seeking God first, he's going to guide you. You have to trust him for that. So, if he's telling you this isn't the person, trust that. And it was just really cool to hear, like, and to think about, if I had tried to push things, what would that have done for their journey? Would it have been delayed? Would it have had extra baggage? Like, it just, I don't know, it was cool to hear, like, oh, okay, that was God then that was speaking. And in being obedient to that, even though it felt like I was doing something cruel, it actually was the best thing. So I think, being very prayerful, really going with your instincts, and I think enjoying where you're at. I mean, find what, whatever season you're in, God has you in that season. So finding what's beautiful about that season. It doesn't have to be, there's going to be struggle. There's going to be struggle whether you're married or dating or, wherever you are, there's going to be difficulties that only come in that scenario. But I think finding what's beautiful, finding the blessings in each season, and really just seeing what God has for you.
Yeah, definitely being content where you are.
Yeah.
You can be content and still wanting something else, but because content and want aren't the same thing.
They're not synonymous. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And also in the way of dating, talk to your friends about the person you're interested in dating.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Because just because you think this person is, the end-all be-all greatest guy you've ever met, your friends could see something that you're not seeing.
And be receptive.
Be receptive.
Yeah.
Don't keep the rose-colored glasses on. And your friends tell you something that they're seeing, take it seriously and really consider it, because you will always see something when you're not in the situation.
Well, and I think, like you were saying, Erin, get yourself a community. Even if that's like one or two people that you need people you can really trust and be transparent with and be open about your struggles, about what you're going through. And you need those people that you trust and trust their advice and trust their wisdom. Obviously, if they're people you wouldn't take advice from, then they shouldn't be in this circle. But if they're people that you trust and those people come to you and bring you concerns about a person that you're getting involved with, listen. Listen to those.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I feel like we could talk about this for hours, and we have. But I think that's we've talked through a lot of different things today, a lot of different avenues, and I'm just thankful that you guys were willing to come and chat on the podcast about where you are and where you hope to be and just what God's doing in your life. And same for Russell and I in our marriage. I think it's good that we're having these conversations, with each other and publicly in our Christian community as well. So thank you, ladies, for joining us today.
Thank you.
If you are listening, you can feel free to go ahead and subscribe to our channel to listen to some more podcasts. If you have any questions or any ideas of what you want to hear on our podcast, you can go ahead and comment below, and we will do our best to talk about those or to answer those questions. Hope you have a great day.